Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. If you're tired of asking those abiding existential questions like, who am I? How did I get here? Who created the universe? And what came before that? Stay tuned, because today we're going to hear from a scientist whose latest book aims to provide answers from a new scientific perspective, and in so doing, provide us with a new theory of everything. Dr. Johan Calleman is a scientist and philosopher with a PhD in physical biology from the University of Stockholm, who has published 30 highly quoted articles in the scientific literature within the fields of chemistry, environmental toxicology, and molecular epidemiology. After leaving his academic career, he spent 25 years developing an understanding of the meaning of the Mayan calendar, and is now widely recognized for his theory that the Mayan calendar reflects the evolution of the global mind. Dr. Calleman, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
You too. So you've written, I think, 8 books over the last 2 decades based on your research on the Mayan calendar, which demonstrate how throughout history each revolution in human consciousness has been driven by 9 waves of creation, which are emanating from the center of the universe, and that they guide its evolution and are behind all revolutions in religion, technology, economy, and social behaviors. Can you give us a very, very, very brief rundown of the difference each wave made to humanity and our world?
Yeah, okay. So there are 9 waves. And they start with at the bottom of a pyramid, you might say. That might be the best metaphor to use. A 9-storied pyramid, a terrace-formed pyramid. And each level of the pyramid corresponds to a certain state of consciousness. And it corresponds to a wave that brings that state of consciousness across the universe, including to our own Earth and to the human beings that live here. At the bottom of the pyramid is a wave that basically creates the simplest forms of life. And it also creates the galaxies, the planets, the stars, and everything we think of in astronomy. The second level goes from these single cells and develops the animals in a wave-like manner. The third level brings the primates, upright standing animals that lead up to the human beings. And the fourth level develops the human beings in a sequence of 7 steps, essentially. Now, once the human beings are created, they start to develop, evolve on their own, you might say, and we are not just another animal. We are an animal that has developed or downloaded, I should say, higher states of consciousness than any of the other animals have done. And so then comes the 5th wave, the 5th level of the pyramid. And that particular level is what makes these animal-like humans to be something more. That's when they start to express themselves artistically and symbolically, and we can see the early cave paintings and so forth. And then comes the 6th wave that was activated in 5,000 years ago, which brings the civilizations. Humans organize themselves in civilizations that build cities and pyramids and many other things that we associate with civilizations. Then on top of that, in the mid 1700s, 1755, comes the seventh wave, and that one develops industry, and it begins with the Industrial Revolution, and since then it has really transformed the technology of the world on a massive scale. And then comes the eighth wave, starting in 1999, which has brought, among other things, I should say, the digital revolution that we're still very much living through and experiencing the changes that it brings. And the top level, though, is not a new technological revolution. It is the ninth wave, which is designed to bring back a unity consciousness. It is like humanity, since this original fifth wave, it's gone through a process from unity through separation. And in this separate state, she has created these various types of technologies. But then ending up in the ninth wave, the top level, which was activated in 2011, and it's designed to bring unity consciousness, no longer projecting darkness onto to ourselves or others.
But you say that game-changing year, the world underwent a shift from duality to darkness, which made civilization more prone to disasters. And we've seen an awful lot of things happening that we weren't expecting since 2011, which really seem to be taking us far away from unity.
Yeah, it is a very complex situation that we are living in. And I should mention then that all of these 9 waves, they are continuing to run. But it's the pattern with which, the interference patterns with which these waves are creating our reality has become very, very complex. And so what happened in the year 2011 is that there was a simultaneous change in all of these waves. One, which is a marked change, is the fact that the sixth wave, the one that had created the civilizations, have gone into what you might call a dark age, one that doesn't create the kind of forward movement in development as it had done for the past 400 years. Now, at the same time, the ninth wave was activated in the same year, in 2011, and there is a certain group of people that are tuning into that particular wave and developing their lives in resonance with that. So it's a complex thing, that situation that we're in now, and the complexity of the interference pattern makes it very difficult to say exactly what is going to happen or like that. It's many changes going on at the same time, including the fact that now both the eighth and ninth wave have very high frequencies and tend to bring changes on a quick rate.
But you've also said that a new kind of personality has appeared who does not recognise truth as a value and ignores all evidence contrary to their already existing views. How does that happen? Is that just a function of people who have not done any work to elevate their consciousness, who are kind of stuck in one of these waves?
Yeah, well, actually, it would have been good to have a picture to demonstrate that. But basically, what happened with the sixth wave, the one that has, in a wave-like manner, created the rise and fall of civilization for the past 5,000 years. And it goes up and down, you might say, when there is a duality of the mind, when there is expansiveness on the one side of the brain, it tends to create, be innovative and creative, so to speak. On the other hand, when it goes down into valleys and it's not a duality, but basically a darkness, that creativity disappears. It's a little bit like as if the inner dialogue disappear. Previously, people would be more reasoning. They would be looking at arguments from here and there. But I think, especially in the United States, I think it's quite obvious that a large portion of the population here has gone into a state where they simply decide what they want to believe, regardless of any evidence in back or forth. And of course, I'm talking about the political arena. But I think people can see this, and it's a phenomenon that you have seen also also among many people that you have thought about as being spiritual, that went into various kinds of conspiracy theories that they simply decide to, and whatever evidence is is for or against is sort of is no longer does not matter. And so that's a change that has happened, I think, and is going on still.
In previous conversations you and I have had, we've talked about the global mind, and we've talked about, we are feeding it and it is feeding us. It is, a bit like the infinity symbol, back and forth, constant interchange. You also said once that shifts do not take place in accordance with what we may expect or want, but according to a plan conceived at a higher level. Who or what is governing that higher level?
Well, the answer to that would be the creator of the universe, and which is not something I can sort of talk specifically about, but at least you can say that a lot of, certainly the present day Maya and a lot of indigenous people would talk about a creator as the source of everything that we see around us. But I wouldn't be able to give any specifics. That's just what I would answer to that. The
Many
creator.
Say it's us.
What?
Many say that it's us. Collectively.
I've heard that, and well, that's a viewpoint. I don't really believe that, but okay. I think that, the whole idea of demonstrating that there is a reality basis put to these waves of creation. In other words, that we can track those and see how a wide range of different phenomena follow this kind of a wave-like pattern demonstrates that there is something outside of us that creates our reality. I think that is probably a too, what should I say, human-centric or egocentric perspective to think that we create this universe. I mean, nobody asked me to create any aspect of it, so to speak, or probably anybody else either. So, I mean, we did not create us coming here to the earth ourselves. That comes from beyond, I would say.
So, okay, you have said that in your view, consciousness already existed before the Big Bang, and the expansion of the universe could simply have been an expansion of consciousness creating matter in a process. That's a hard one to get one's head around. I mean, how is that possible?
Well, I don't think it's particularly strange. The alternative would be that the universe starts with this explosion of matter that is the view of official science. But then this matter would be subject to sort of the simple laws of nature, like gravitation and so forth. And we cannot see in any way how that would lead to any living species. So for this reason, consciousness then is really what creates this experience of the difference between what is outside of ourselves and our inner selves. Consciousness is the subjective experience, and the potential for that, for such experiences, it begins already before the Big Bang. Who knows if it's all planned even before the Big Bang? That would be my guess, that it's all laid out in how this consciousness then will evolve step by step in accordance with these different wave movements.
Dr. Johan Calleman says consciousness is not what we have, it's what we are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I could say no problem with it. I don't know immediately the consequences of it, but certainly yes.
So tell me about your... Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. We are conscious. We are conscious beings, and the fact that we are conscious is really what gives life meaning, significance, and value. You know, you could think of human beings without who were not conscious. They would just be matter, basically, and maybe they could function exactly like we do. But without that consciousness, there would be no meaning to life, there would be no value to life, and there would be no significance of life. So it's a very significant thing, the very nature of consciousness.
Yeah, and clearly some are more conscious than others. You know, that we've definitely got levels of consciousness, haven't we? Especially working on this planet right now, we are seeing all those different levels, as you mentioned earlier. But let's talk about your new book, The Living Universe, because every one of your books, you know, follows on from the other. It's your latest research, and there are steps to understanding your work through those books. What have you come up with? You know, what is this new theory of origins?
Well, there are several aspects of this, but one of the most, I think, compelling and interesting things is the how to place the Big Bang. Let us say that is the first sort of explosion of matter, the first elements, hydrogen and helium coming into existence. But it places, and that has been sort of heralded by official science as some kind of incomprehensible random thing that just happened. And so that basically saying that we don't have to think that there might be some intelligence behind this process. It's just a random explosion. That's sort of what is always implied in the official science descriptions of this event. Now, what I've done here is, among other things, is to place that event in a sequence with the wave movements, and in particular then with the first wave movement, which later in new steps of this wave would generate life forms, and the timing fits perfectly into this. And the importance of this is to see that life as it has evolved, including the Big Bang, I should say that it shows that the Big Bang is a step in the evolution of life, a preconceived step in the evolution of life. And so that again, it all demonstrates that there is an underlying plan for evolution, not only then biological evolution, but then the later evolution of humankind based on shifting states of consciousness at higher levels of the pyramid, if you like. So that, I think, is a significant finding that is being presented here. It also presents an explanation to why is it that the constants of nature, the constants of physics, are what is called fine-tuned to the creation of life. Now, this has been a sort of a mystery again, and I'm sort of talking from the perspective of official science. There has been these scientists, say Stephen Hawking or other people with that kind of stature, that had pointed out that if one of these constants would be just a slightly bit different from what it is, we wouldn't exist. And meaning that somehow it looks like all the constants that we now can measure in the universe from the very beginning were fine-tuned in order to produce the result that this evolution of the universe has created. And how did this happen? Was it just randomly sort of that all these constants got the values that they did, and we're here just by accident, so to speak? Well, that is a viewpoint of official science. But I present an explanation to why and how these constants were fine-tuned, and that requires the constants, you might say, the frequencies of these waves that, I should say then, these waves, they go back, or were first discovered by the ancient Maya, and they are the ones that sort of calibrated their frequencies, their activation times, and so forth. And so these waves, and which in ancient times would be referred to as cosmic serpents or flying serpents, feathered serpents, or so forth, they are really the factors that are synchronizing all of evolution. And that's why we can look upon it as a time plan where all the different factors, so far at least, have come into place in the right time and taken us to where we are now.
Do we have any idea how the Mayans were able to become aware of these waves?
Well, not really, except for the fact that they probably sensed themselves. Now we're going up into a peak, and now we're going down in a peak. For instance, there is people have often talked about the disappearance of the Maya, which is not true, really, because there are still millions of Mayans living in the regions where their ancient culture existed in present-day Mexico and Guatemala. But it is true that there came certain time points. For instance, 1224, when the Chichen Itza, probably the most famous and most visited of the pyramids in Mexico, was abandoned. Now, this year, 1224, it coincides exactly with that kind of a shift point where the time went from a peak to a valley. Now, it doesn't take more than to be sensitive of these changes. People that could have been more sensitive also in our own times, and then, but in those times they were sensitive to that kind of a change that actually led to the collapse of their pyramidal civilization, if we call it that. And so I think in ancient times people were sensitive to things that we are no longer sensitive. You might say that they lived in the sixth wave, and in that wave, which is a deeper level, you might say, than the current states of consciousness that we're in. In that time, people all over the world were sensitive to ideas, or sensitive to the tree of life, sensitive to cosmic serpents, sensitive to yin and yang, sensitive to many other such concepts that today we would talk about them as mythological, and most people would say they're not true. But I would say that they are very true. People have just forgotten about them. And these are the concepts that are driving evolution also in our present time. But since we have added new and more technological levels of consciousness onto that sixth wave that the ancients were living in, we have basically shut it out of our minds. And the way I have retrieved it, you might say, is just basically based on historical studies and seeing how that fits with the various shift points in these waves. And overall, the fit of these historical events to these waves are just staggering. They're just amazingly close. But we're not sensitive to it for the most part, I would say. Some people are, but for the most part, not.
So, in your studies, understanding the waves and the downward dips and the upward dips and the changes of the long night and the long day, you have been able to predict things that have actually happened. You predicted the 2008 financial crash, didn't you, using the Mayan calendar? Are you constantly looking at the calendar to see what's coming next?
No. I think that prediction, that nobody can take away from me, the prediction of when that great recession would happen, is probably one of the most precise predictions anybody has done, without basing yourself on sort of a economic reasoning. I made the predictions just based on, here comes a shift in the Mayan calendar that, based on the pattern we can see, will generate some kind of a downturn in the economy. But as I said now, since 2011, the pattern of interference, the interference pattern of these has become so complex that I don't want to sort of stick out my head and make predictions, because chances are so great that they may not turn out. But the reason I did that when I could do it is that simply just to convey to people that the Mayan calendar is not some kind of a woo-woo thing or something that lacks reality. It is really just an expanded science, and an expanded science that incorporates the ancient peoples of the Western Hemisphere that, up until recently they simply have been excluded from contributing their knowledge to how we perceive our worldview today. So at this point in time, I look more, take the details of what is happening, the shift points, I take them more lightly. I do follow the sacred calendar and the ninth wave, but I don't, I will not, it's too complex for more than in general terms to make specific predictions. That I don't really do that on a daily basis anymore.
We're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is scientist, philosopher, author, and leading authority on the Mayan calendar, Dr. Johan Calleman. And we're talking about his latest book, The Living Universe, the new theory of origins, explaining consciousness, the Big Bang, fine-tuning, dark matter, and the evolution of life and human history. When we come back from the break, we'll be talking about why time is speeding up and what we can learn from the rise and fall of ancient civilizations that would help our situation today. We'll be back with more in a few moments, so stay tuned.
OMTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees and no BS, just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
I wanted to talk to you about a program called the Dream Arc and a retreat that we're doing, and I want to invite you along. And the Dream Arc is a dream technology. And even the latest physics is suggesting now that reality is not what we think it is, that it's kind of a construct, and that the Dream Arc teaches us how to use the full operating system to navigate our brain frequencies between waking and sleeping and dreaming, and to move through the inner realms and the outer realms seamlessly. And you will work in the Dream Arc with certain animals that will come to you, maybe in real life, maybe through your intuition, in magical ways, or perhaps through, just dreams that come to you. It's filled, the Dream Arc, with invitations and suggestions and tasks that you choose intuitively. You choose the ones for you. You don't know what you're choosing, but they come to you. So please join us as we dive down the wormhole into the Dream Arc, and let's see what happens.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Dr. Johan Calleman, is time really speeding up or are we imagining it?
We are imagining it, I would say. But what has happened is that the rate of creation has speeded up. And that's because with every level of the pyramid, with every wave of the pyramid that go higher one step, you will have a 20-fold increase in the frequency of that particular wave. And so there is an enormous difference in frequency between the lowest of the waves of the pyramid and the 9th wave. It's every time is 20 times 20 times 20 times 20, etc. Faster. But this is the process of creation but we're all, whether we are aware of it or not, we are in resonance with these various waves. And so no wonder that we experience time as speeding up. And I think it's now come to a sort of a top level of speed. It won't speed up very much further, but certainly in the past 30 years, we have seen a dramatic speed up in time, and the eighth wave that started in 1999 and brought the digital revolution has constantly changed our environment, our technological environment and social environment and so forth. And that's because it operates on a very high frequency, and change comes very quickly.
The pace of life is certainly speeding up. I mean, we don't have to wait for anything anymore. It is there at the click of a button. News, we don't have to wait for the 10 o'clock news at night because it's on our phones every second. So I think with all this information coming through, it's not surprising that we get a sense that everything is moving fast.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about your course on macrocosmic quantum theory, the Mayan calendar and the evolution of consciousness. You teach participants the meaning of ancient mythological concepts, such as the tree of life, which you mentioned earlier, the cosmic serpent, etc. Why are these so important to be teaching now?
Well, I think if we want to have a holistic view of the universe, which includes what you might talk of the mechanism that underlies evolution, then we have to deal with these concepts. And neither the serpents nor the tree of life are physical objects. They are relate to the quantum reality, the macrocosmic quantum reality that underlies our physical reality, and which means that they're not easily measured or detected directly. We have to do that indirectly, but it seems that the ancients did not need any kind of instruments or so to convince themselves of the existence of these concepts, and they did look upon them as profoundly important. You'd be hard pressed to find any ancient culture that did not recognize the tree of life. I have never heard of one. I'd be curious if anybody has found anyone. So certainly in that sense, if nothing else, it is to understand why the ancients thought of the world that they did. And that is by itself a very interesting topic that I like to go into. But then it is also that you might say that the view of official science is that we can understand everything that happens in the world ultimately from what you might call material factors, like maybe human beings inventing things or whatever. But then these concepts that like the tree of life and the cosmic serpent and so forth, they are not material concepts. They are underlying things. And so I think they're necessary for anybody who wants to understand how we came here. And in that regard, the explanations are very, very, what shall I say, full of rich, I should say, and also at least tentatively grasp what is happening today. And I would say also that it does tell us where we're meant to go. Whether the world is going there or not, we hope it's going there, but it does tell us where we're meant to go. We are meant to go to a state of consciousness that is unity consciousness. And we're not there yet, but that's where we're meant to go. And I think people, this kind of studies that goes into ancient mythological concepts and retrieves them into our modern world, helps us to give us an idea of where we're meant to go, and compels us to work with the issues as what can be done in order to go there.
That course also provides a deepened understanding of how healing takes place from a macrocosmic quantum perspective. Tell me about that.
Well, it's you might say that Gabor Mate, that I think you're familiar with, he's talked about our whole civilizations as our whole civilization being traumatized. And I think that's largely true. The particular wave of the sixth wave that created civilizations were based on duality, and were essentially also based on dominance. It created worlds in which there was somebody who were ruling others, dominating others. And if you think about it, I think most traumas in human life, they derive from the fact that somebody has exerted inappropriately dominance over you. So that is a wave that has, that has shaped humanity for about 5,000 years. It's only in the mid 1700s where much of the brutality and so forth that was associated with this started to be questioned, started to be argued against. It was only at that point that slavery started to be outlawed and so forth. And so there is a long history then of humankind, of this sixth wave in particular, of duality and dominance that has created traumas on a scale that we may not be able to fathom. And I mean, I should say that it's not just that this wave created bad things, it also created what we call civilizations and organizing humanity on a larger scales into nations and empires and the basic technologies for a higher life, so to speak. So it's not just that it's bad, but it did also, that came at some kind of a price, and that price is as I mentioned then, the expressed in traumas that we have inherited over the generations. And now what this means then is that if we can transcend this duality, it means that the compartmentalization of traumas will be disengaged, you might say. In that sense, it opens up for the possibility of having a single unified mind that doesn't create separation. Separation is one of the major consequences of the duality of the sixth wave. And so in order for healing to take place, regardless of if you're looking upon it as an individual thing or if you look upon it as a thing referring to the collective of humanity, that duality has to be transcended. And the wave that holds the potential for that is the ninth wave. And so that means that developing resonance with the ninth wave holds the potential of healing.
So how do we develop that resonance? What do we personally do?
Yeah, I think one way of doing it is to sort of follow the ninth wave, to see how it expresses yourself in your own life, and that is something I would wish to have happened on a large scale, so to speak, because it could result in the synchronization of many different people's paths leading towards this unity consciousness. But I should also mention that, for instance, my collaborator Patricia Albert in New York, who runs something called the Evolutionary Collective. I mean, she has developed a process that she looks upon as for people to get in contact with that ninth wave. And I should not share exactly what that process looks like, but the intention is there. And but I also think that, you know, in order to get there, I think there is a whole range of practices that at least will move you in the direction towards the ninth wave. You know, I could think of meditations, breathworks, psychedelics, or drumming, or many other things, and they maybe apply to some people and not for others, so to speak. But they still have this in common of sort of disengaging, and I think that's quite clear when it comes to the mechanism of psychedelics, that they disengage the compartmentalization of our minds. You know, the traumas that we have either inherited or we have acquired in our own lifetimes, they are then what happens in the kind of dualist minds that we have been, geometrically separated minds, is that they get compartmentalized and hidden, so to speak, placed in a certain location, you might say, or a certain resonance of the mind. And at least with psychedelics, I'm confident that works in order to decompartmentalize the mind, and that is, in a sense, unity. That is, in a sense, a step towards unity consciousness. But then it's a whole thing. You know, we're talking about how do you get this immutable? How do you make it like? You know, I've had these kind of experiences with some of these different techniques by myself, but you know, and it lifts me up, but for the most part, it's temporary, and but how do you make it into a sort of immutable state of consciousness? And I think one of the reasons we haven't seen that much of it is that I think you have to really be born into the ninth wave, so that, you know, that is the state of consciousness that welcomes you when you come into the world. And people born into the ninth wave, they are now, if you count 2011, it's they're 12 years of age. And so I do expect that it will take some time, maybe then to say 2031 or something like that, when they come of age. There is a new generation then that have had that original imprint in a way that you and I did not have. And then things might start to change. It's not an immediate thing, I think, but it really, they will need some time to sort of clear out all the illusions that they've been given by previous generations. But that's what I think. I think then, you know, around 2031, things will change, at least in according to my values, that things will start to change for what I would call better. Yeah. But I think we still have a hard time to go until then.
So you, on your website, you also issue a personal invitation for people to explore the influence of the, as you said, the ninth wave on their personal lives, and also be part of a project that's going to develop a coherent description of its effect on human consciousness. when one thinks about studying, when I think about studying the Mayan calendar, it feels awfully complicated to me. Are your online courses, simplified?
Well, I certainly think so. I hope so. I mean, the feedback I have received has been positive, and I don't really think it is that complicated. You can make it complicated, and some people are introducing a range of different calendars that the Maya would use, and there's been these sort of also debates about the nitty-gritty details of these different debates. But if you sort of begin by simply focusing on these major waves, and certainly the sixth wave, is what dominated the ancient Maya. It is what they would call the long count that they would use always to date their pyramids and so forth. And but which is one of the ways you have to, I think, include. But I think there is some kind of a resistance that I really never know how to deal with, that this should be complicated. In my view, it is something that makes things very, very much simpler. And for instance, this unified theory that I'm presenting in this book, the living universe, it sort of replaces, in my view, a huge amount of scholarly studies in all kinds of topics, or in all kinds of disciplines, and instead replaces it with a fairly simple structure of 9 waves of creation that helps you explain large portions of what has created our universe and has led us to here. So I can't really respond to that. I do think that some people are a little bit wary of calendars like that, but I think basically the system is simple, and that's my response.
Well, you do offer calculators, 3 calculators that may be used as practical tools to help people doing the course. I guess it's a bit like looking at studying astrology. If you're really going to study astrology, it does look like a long job. And I know because I've been studying it for about 40 plus years. And it is not as difficult as I thought it was. So I'm just has to dive into it. We're almost out of time. One question. Back in 2015, you and I had a conversation about one of your earlier books on the global mind, and you talked about the long count, the 400-year count, and you said that we were coming to a point where that was changing, and that the power was going to go to the east. And in the period since then, we've seen a lot of evidence to suggest that could be happening. We've had the BRICS conferences, etc. Are we in that new 400-year period now? And is it really going to take 400 years to change?
I believe so. On the level of the civilizational level, I think it is still true that East is increasingly becoming the dominant, or I should say more clearly, I think it's still true that the Western dominance of the world is going back. It won't hold up, and it has nothing to do with what I would like or not. But I think that this is what we will see, and in principle, that could also mean that there is a potential for not immediately, of course, but for some kind of a balance to be created, not only between East and West, but also between all the nations of the world. I mean, the world is not balanced, and certainly for the past 400 years, it has been very, very markedly dominated by the Western powers. And I think this is coming to an end at this point. And it won't, any kind of Western dominance would have to take 400 years to come back. But I think the hope, at least for me, is that if, regardless of how this balance is created between of East and West, it may not necessarily be pretty, but regardless of how that is, I think it does provide for some kind of a platform for those that ultimately are seeking this balance, that are seeking unity.
I'm going to have to leave it there now, Carl, because we really are out of time. But I think that's a really good point to leave it on, is that ultimately it will create balance, and that is exactly what we need. Carl Calleman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Sandie.
The Living Universe, the new theory of origins explaining consciousness, the Big Bang, fine-tuning, dark matter, the evolution of life and human history by Carl Johan Calleman is available from all the usual online bookstores and from his website. And you can learn more about his books, courses, work and events, and subscribe to his newsletter at calleman.com. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back with another edition of What is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you, Carl Calleman.
Thank you.